The studio lights beamed like 1,000 suns. Behind the polished glass table, leaders from across the globe sat still, their faces tense. At the center, U.S. President Donald Trump leaned forward, voice echoing through the live feed.
African?
Nations talk about dignity, but where is your power? Where's your global influence? Leadership isn't given, it's earned. A murmur rippled through the room. Captain Ibrahim Traoré sat beside the Rwanda president, his face calm, his fingers folded neatly. He didn't flinch. His silence was louder than applause. The air felt heavy. Even the camera crew stood frozen. Trump smirked, thinking he'd won. Leadership, Trump repeated, is not for those who beg at the table. Suddenly, Traoré shifted. He turned slowly and looked straight into Trump's eyes. Then he said it. "You're not fit to lead the world," gasps. A heartbeat skipped. Then silence. Deafening silence. The studio froze. Somewhere, a producer dropped their headset. The camera zoomed in tight on Trump's jaw tightening. And in that moment, something shifted forever. Within minutes, the internet exploded. Traoré Trump trended in 40 countries. But inside the Geneva studio, no one moved. Trump's face stiffened for once. Words didn't come easily. "Excuse me?" he finally spat. "What did you say?" Traoré didn't raise his voice. He didn't blink. "I said you're not fit to lead the world because leadership requires humility, and the world is tired of being spoken down to." The air turned electric. One of the African delegates quietly wiped his eye. The global broadcast continued. Cameras flicking from Traoré's composed face to Trump's rising anger. "You come here to insult me," Trump snapped. "I gave your continent aid." "Respect," Traoré responded, steady as ever. "You gave us what served you, not what honored us." His voice was soft, but it hit like thunder. Trump's face flushed red, but the studio still quiet. No moderator dared interrupt. Viewers around the world clutched their phones. Children in Ouagadougou watched beside their mothers. Veterans in Detroit upped the volume. African students in Paris held back tears because, for the first time in a long time, someone was speaking, not with rage, but with truth. And the world wasn't ready. Backstage, CNN anchor Danielle Morris wiped a tear. She had covered wars, scandals, protests, but this moment it was different. Her earpiece buzzed. "Stay with this. Viewership is skyrocketing." She stepped into the frame, trembling slightly. "We're witnessing what may be one of the most historic live moments in recent political memory." In the background, Trump leaned back. In his chair, lips pressed tight. "How dare you lecture me?" he finally growled. But Traoré didn't fight. He simply replied, "The world is not your audience. It's your responsibility." Then he did something no one expected. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a photo. It was old, faded. He held it up. "This," he said quietly, "is my mother. She died carrying water on her head for 10 miles. So forgive me if I don't see leadership the way you do." Theron gasped again. Trump opened his mouth, but again no words came on Twitter. Tears poured into the comment sections. "I'm crying at work." He didn't shout, he just told the truth. This is not just politics, this is humanity. And in living rooms across the globe, people whispered the same words. Who is Ibrahim Traoré? The tension hadn't lifted. Trump's lips moved, but no sound came out. His cheeks flushed.
Oh.
His eyes darted left, then right. For a man used to control, the silence was unbearable. What gives you the right? Trump finale burst out. You who were born in a country with no power, no economy, no seat at the table. What gives you the right to question me? The air in the room went cold. Captain Ibrahim Traoré sat perfectly still, hands folded, face unreadable. Not angry, not defensive, just still. Then he replied the same thing that gave my mother the right to carry water for our family in the hot sun. Survival. A woman in the back gasped. One of the moderators lowered her eyes. You lead from podiums, Traoré continued. But we lead from pain. There was a different silence this time, a heavy one, the kind that wraps around the heart and squeezes. Trump opened his mouth again, but Traoré gently raised one hand. Let me finish. And somehow, everyone, even Trump, listened because this wasn't just a reply. It was a quiet storm. Traoré reached into his breast pocket and slowly unfolded a worn photograph. It was crinkled, sun-faded. A young African woman stood beside a clay house. She held a baby in one arm and a bucket of water in the other. Her feet were bare, her eyes tired but proud. "This is my mother," Traoré said. "She was 16 when she gave birth to me. She died before I turned 12. I never knew anything but hunger and heat until I joined the army." The studio froze. Even Trump's posture changed. "This picture is the only thing I carry with me when I travel. Not a flag, not medals. Her because she reminds me of who I fight for." A few audience members looked away, blinking fast. One journalist visibly wiped a tear. Mr. Traoré continued. "You think leadership is about titles and trophies, but for some of us, it's about not letting our mothers die in vain." His voice cracked just a little, enough to break something inside everyone watching. "You insult Africa, but Africa gave birth to me. I will never forget her." The world watched in silence, and for the first time even Trump did too. The broadcast was still rolling. Social media was in chaos. Millions were already calling it the Geneva Moment. But inside the studio, time felt like it had stopped. "So what's your plan then, Captain?" Trump scowled bitterly to scold us into silence. Traoré slowly turned to the moderators, then looked back at Trump. "No, my plan is to remind the world that power doesn't mean truth. And sometimes truth has to come from those you least expect." His voice was low, steady, full of something older than politics. "Wisdom. You said Africa has no power?" True added. "But what we have, what you've lost, is humility." That word echoed, humility. Across the world, children watched with their parents. People paused in airports, in taxis, in classrooms. "Leadership without humility," Traoré said softly, "is just a performance." Trump sat back, visibly shaken, his jaw clenched again. But his eyes flickered with something rare. Was it respect? Traoré didn't gloat. He didn't smile, just breathed in and exhaled. And in that breath, the world heard a new kind of leadership. Quiet, painful, real, and suddenly very, very human. The words hung in the air. "You're not fit to lead the world." Camera zoomed in on Trump's face, stiff and tight like a clenched fist, his lips pressed thin. His eyes betrayed a mix of shock and fury, but no one spoke. Not the moderators, not the other leaders, not even the crew. The silence stretched painfully long, like the moment before a thunderstorm. Traoré sat calm as a river, steady and unmoving. Suddenly, Trump's voice broke through the silence, sharp and low. "Who do you think you are?" But Traoré didn't flinch. His gaze held firm. "I am the son of a continent that survived slavery, colonization, an endless war. I am the voice of millions who refuse to be silent anymore." The studio held its breath. In that moment, it wasn't just a clash of two men. It was history itself holding a mirror up to the world. As cameras continued rolling, Traoré leaned forward, his voice calm but carrying weight. "Leadership isn't about the size of your bank account or the number of missiles you own. It's about the strength to face the truth." Trump's jaw tightened again. But this time, Traoré wasn't speaking to him alone. He was speaking to every young African watching from a small village. Every mother struggling to feed her children, every person who had been told they didn't matter. His words were a beacon of hope wrapped in quiet defiance. "Our strength comes from resilience, from rising despite the world's doubt." The studio lights seemed to dim, focusing only on Traoré's steady expression. A man who carried his people's pain and pride on his shoulders. Across the globe, viewers felt something shift, an unexpected spark of hope in the darkness. Within minutes of the broadcast, the clip exploded across social media platforms. Traoré v. Trump began trending worldwide. Millions debated, some cheered. Traoré's courage, others defended Trump's legacy. But one thing was clear. The world was watching and listening like never before. In homes from Nairobi to New York, families paused their dinners to rewatch the moment. Young activists in Paris shared the clip with tears in their eyes. Even journalists called it one of the most powerful political moments of the decade. And back in the studio, the tension was still palpable. Trump, visibly shaken, but trying to mask it, looked across the table. For the first time, he seemed unsure. Traoré, however, sat silently proud, knowing this moment was bigger than any one person. It was a call to the world to rethink, to reflect, and to rise. After the broadcast, behind closed doors, the studio's atmosphere was heavy. The producers whispered nervously. The cameras were turned off, but the silence spoke louder than any words. Traoré sat quietly in a small room, away from the spotlight. His eyes were tired but steady. His mind traveled years back to his childhood village, where electricity was a luxury and clean water a dream. He remembered his mother's hands cracked and calloused from years of hard work, always reaching for him with hope in her eyes. That memory was his true power. Meanwhile, back in the main hall, Trump's advisors gathered, visibly unsettled. A man used to winning felt the sting of unexpected truth.
Always.
Words had done more than rattle a former president. They had pierced through decades of silence. Outside the studio, reporters scrambled to understand the meaning behind the calm defiance. Social media was exploding with messages of hope, pride, and fierce debate. For Traoré, this moment was just the beginning. Hours later, in a quiet room halfway across the world, Traoré's mother's prayer echoed softly in his mind. She had prayed for her son to be strong, not just strong in body, but in spirit. Her voice, though gone now, lived in him. May you always stand for what is right, even when the world tries to silence you. The words carried him through sleepless nights of preparation, through the hardest battles on the ground. That night, as the world watched the viral clip, a young African woman in a nearby village held her baby close. She was one of millions who saw in Traoré a reflection of their own struggles and dreams. For them, he wasn't just a leader. Family, Traoré's challenge to Trump was more than a political moment. It was a message of dignity for millions who had long been ignored. And as the world debated, his mother's prayer became a silent anthem, rising from the dust and hope of Africa's heartbeat. The days following the broadcast brought an unexpected wave. World leaders, activists, and citizens from all corners started to speak about the moment when Traoré stood tall and spoke truth. News outlets replayed the confrontation again and again. Children in classrooms watched the clip and whispered about a new kind of leader, a leader who spoke with honesty and heart. In Washington, a few politicians shifted uneasily in their seats. For the first time, many asked themselves, what does true leadership look like? Traoré's calm defiance had sparked a fire, not just a fire of anger, but of hope. A hope that the world could change, that voices once ignored could now shape the future. And deep inside, Traoré knew this was only the start of a long journey. The eyes of the world were watching, and the world was beginning to listen. The morning after the broadcast, Traoré walked here before dawn. The world's eyes had shifted onto him, and with that came an unbearable weight. He thought about the countless people who believed in him, the farmers struggling with drought, the children dreaming of school, the families hoping for peace. His heart ached knowing that many leaders had failed them. But failure was not an option for Traoré. He had promised to be different, to lead with courage and honesty. Yet the pressure was crushing. In a small room at his residence, Traoré allowed himself a rare moment of vulnerability. His hands trembled slightly as he touched a photo of his late father, his first hero, and a man who had taught him the meaning of resilience. Tears welled in his eyes, but he wiped them away quickly. There was no time for doubt. The world was watching, and he had to show them what true leadership looked like. Meanwhile, in villages across Africa, a powerful movement was stirring. Mothers who had long feared for their children's future spoke with renewed hope. Young men and women tired of being sidelined felt a new courage growing inside. Traoré's words had become their anthem. At a market in Ouagadougou, an elderly woman clutched her radio tightly, tears streaming down her face. "He speaks like one of us," she said softly, her voice trembling with emotion. "He tells the truth." In cities thousands of miles away, African students organized discussions about what real power meant. The old ways of silence and submission were being challenged. And across the globe, people began to see Traoré not just as a leader, but as a symbol of dignity and strength. His message was clear. The future belonged to those who refused to be invisible. Back in Geneva, the calm surface hit a fierce battle. Traoré faced not only political opposition, but invisible forces determined to silence him. Threats came quietly through whispers in the hallways, through muted calls in the night, but he did not waver. His staff saw a man who carried not just his own dreams, but the hopes of an entire continent. Late one night, as rain poured outside, Traoré sat by the window, staring at the city lights. He thought of his people, of the sacrifices made. And in that quiet moment, he made a silent vow. No matter the cost, he would never back down. The world might watch and judge, but his resolve was unbreakable, because this was more than politics. It was a fight for the soul of his people. The world waited breathless as Ibrahim Traoré stepped up to speak again. This time at a historic United Nations summit days after the broadcast. The hall was silent, every eye fixed on him. He looked, beyond the audience, toward the millions who watched from homes, villages, and cities worldwide. His voice was steady, but carried the weight of history. "I am not here to challenge anyone's power," he said softly. "I am here to demand respect, respect for all those whose voices have been silenced for too long." The words touched something. Deep in the hearts of many, tears flowed quietly in the audience from parents dreaming of a better future, from young people hungry for change. In that moment, Traoré became more than a leader. He became a symbol of hope, dignity, and courage. As Traoré's message spread like wildfire, reactions poured in from every corner of the globe. Supporters rallied, inspired by his calm strength. Critics tried to tear him down, but their words felt hollow next to the truth he spoke. In Africa, communities celebrated. In classrooms, children learned about the power of standing tall. And even in places where politics was harsh and divisive, people found themselves moved, some to tears, others to reflection. For many, Traoré had rekindled a belief that leaders could be honest, compassionate, and brave. His stand against Trump was no longer just a political act. It was a beacon, and the world was starting to change. Months passed, and the viral clip remained a symbol of transformation. Traoré continued his work not with arrogance, but with humility and an unbreakable commitment to his people. Visited villages, schools, and cities, always listening, always fighting for justice. On a quiet evening, standing beneath a vast African sky, Traoré reflected on his journey. He thought of the mothers who prayed, the children who dreamed, and the countless faces filled with hope. His eyes welled up with tears, not of sadness, but of profound gratitude. This was more than leadership. It was love. And in that love, he found the strength to carry on. Thank you for joining this journey. If this story touched your heart, please like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Your support helps spread the message of hope and courage. Together, we can build a world where every voice is heard. Don't forget to hit the bell to never miss a story that moves you deeply. Let's keep this conversation alive. I'm waiting to read your thoughts.